So let's unpack a scenario here. Imagine if a disgraced billionaire builds this sprawling, decadent mega mansion right in the middle of your city, like complete with a massive private lake.
And people would absolutely
Yeah,
riot.
right, exactly. But now imagine the next mayor comes into office and they just drain that private lake and build a state-of-the-art, entirely free public sports stadium right on top of it.
Yeah, you basically take a symbol of selfish tyranny and just hand the land right back to the people.
And that is exactly what happened in ancient Rome. Welcome to today's deep dive. We've got a really fantastic stack of historical texts and archaeological research that a listener submitted today. And our mission is to use these sources to peel back all those Hollywood myths surrounding the Colosseum. So that billionaire we were talking about was Emperor Nero, who built this extravagant golden house after a massive fire. And the mayor, well, that was Emperor Vespasian.
Right, so Vespasian actually used the spoils from the Jewish-Roman War to fund this whole thing. And by building the Flavian Amphitheater, which was its original name, by the way, he was really cementing his new dynasty's legitimacy. He was signaling to the public that, I work for Rome unlike Nero.
The scale of the engineering in these sources is it's what really gets me. We're talking about a venue that held over 50,000 spectators. I mean, without modern cranes or steel, how does a structure that massive not just collapse under its own weight?
Well, it comes down to Roman concrete, which is wild because it was actually self-healing. So they mixed volcanic ash called pozzolana with lime and volcanic rocks, but they purposefully left these small chunks of unmixed lime called lime clasts inside the concrete.
Wait, why would you leave unmixed chunks in the material? Wouldn't that, make it weaker?
You would totally think so, but it's this brilliant mechanism. When the concrete inevitably cracks over time and rainwater seeps in, it hits those lime clasts. The water causes the lime to dissolve and react and crystallize. So it literally glues the cracks shut from the inside.
That is just wild.
It really is.
And they use this basically indestructible material to build an incredibly efficient crowd control system. You constantly see the term vomitoria used for the exits in these architectural layouts.
Yep.
I always just assumed that was a special room where people went to throw up after eating too much.
That's a super common myth, actually. Vomitoria comes from the Latin word for spewing forth. So it refers to how quickly the massive crowds could be expelled from the building. The seating system was mapped out using red-painted numbers over 76 public arches to guide citizens to their specific seats.
But those brilliant exits were actually designed for some pretty intense social segregation, right? Meaning they didn't want the cheap seats mixing with the VIPs.
Precisely. The seating strictly enforced Roman social hierarchy.
Yeah.
So the emperor and the patricians, they sat at the very bottom, right closest to the action.
Right where the best view is.
Exactly. And as you moved higher, your social status dropped, ending with women and enslaved people up on these wooden benches at the very top. The architecture physically forced everyone into their exact place in society.
Wow. So if the seating was about controlling the Roman people, the arena floor was really about controlling nature and life itself. Below the sand was the hypogeum, this massive two-story underground maze.
It was essentially a massive theatrical machine. They had human-powered elevators operated by these complex pulley systems.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it allowed wild beasts or gladiators or even elaborate scenery to just magically shoot up through trapdoors onto the arena floor.
Okay, but I have to ask about what was actually happening on that floor, because every Hollywood movie shows this constant bloodbath where gladiators fight to the death every single time. But if you're pouring all this money into renting highly trained fighters, how could anyone afford to just kill off their star attractions daily?
Well, they couldn't. Gladiators were massive financial investments. They were rented from these specific training schools, and if a fighter died, the sponsor of the games had to pay their full, exorbitant replacement value back to the school.
Oh, so it was a bad business decision.
A terrible one. Because it was so expensive to lose them, historians estimate that only maybe 10 to 20% of matches actually ended in death.
So the whole thumbs down means death thing is completely overblown too, then.
Mostly, yeah, it's later invention. Ancient texts suggest the actual gesture for death was a thumb pointed horizontally at the throat, mimicking a sword thrust.
I mean, even if it wasn't a total mortality rate for gladiators, the sources do make it clear that we can't sanitize this place. It was fundamentally a tool for emperors to demonstrate absolute power over life and death.
Oh, absolutely. The lunchtime executions staged here were horrific. Criminals or prisoners of war were subjected to lethal theatrical plays.
Right, they would basically reenact mythology for the crowd, but for real.
Yeah, for example, they staged the myth of Prometheus, the guy who had his liver eaten by an eagle, but instead they swapped out the eagle for a live bear.
Just brutal. And there are also accounts in these texts of actual naval battles. Like, how do you flood a concrete building without it just draining away?
Well, ancient writers like Cassius Dio record this happening during the inaugural games. So before that underground hypogeum maze was built, they could route water from the nearby aqueducts directly into the arena basin.
Wait, so they just filled the whole thing up?
Yeah, they flooded it with 5 to 7 feet of water, just enough to float flat-bottom ships.
It's so surreal to picture that happening right in the middle of a city. But what's equally fascinating to me is what happens to the buildings centuries later. Because the
Hmm.
Roman Empire falls, but the Colosseum doesn't just sit there as this neat tourist attraction.
No, not at all. As Rome's population plummeted and earthquakes damaged the structure, it became this massive, convenient quarry. People literally stripped the iron clamps and the valuable travertine stone to go build other parts of the city.
And then during the Middle Ages, a powerful family called the Franchpain literally moved in. Like, why would you live in an abandoned arena?
In the chaotic, warring environment of medieval Rome, you needed a stronghold. What better fortress than a massive, indestructible concrete ring right in the center of the
Mhm.
city? They just walled up the arches and fortified it.
Imagine a modern sports arena transforming into a heavily guarded medieval castle. It really highlights the grand contradiction at the heart of these sources for me. The Colosseum is undeniably a masterpiece of architectural genius and urban planning.
Oh, for sure. Yet it stands simultaneously as one of history's most chilling monuments to imperial violence and mass suffering.
Right. Which brings us back to where we started. We built a hypothetical modern stadium over a billionaire's lake. But considering that the self-healing Roman concrete of the Colosseum will likely outlast our modern steel and glass stadiums by millennia, it really leaves you wondering,
Hmm.
what will